First of all, I want to ask to you what kind of interpretation did you make of fairy tales in respect of interpretation in Freudian style, like those of Erich Fromm, for instance?
Yes.
Yes.
Or Bruno Bettelheim, yes.
Or Bruno Bettelheim, yes.
Well, I gave a Jungian interpretation, and that is a complete reversal. Namely, it is not applying concepts or identifying the images of the fairy tale, identify them with concepts and say this is repressed sexuality, this is a problem of puberty and so on, this is. But on the contrary, to try to listen to the message of these symbols, to take a passive mental attitude, and to, by the method of amplification, that means by enriching it with parallel image, try to intuitively guess to what unknown factor it is aiming at. We look at fairy tales like at collective dreams, because they are naturally invented by storytellers, by individuals, but only those remain successful and survive the centuries which express general human problems.
Could you make an example about one specific?
Well, I don't want to, rather let's take a specific motif. The hero is very often so-called dumbling, stupid and lazy. Now, this is a compensatory image to the fact that in Western collective consciousness we overestimate achievement and success. And therefore, the naive, stupid chap who is genuine and therefore related to his instincts, he generally has a helpful animal who tells him what to do. That would be the genuine man who is related to his instinct versus the intellectual or collectively thinking man. And he's generally the savior or the one who marries the princess and becomes the new king. He's the bringer of a conscious or cultural renewal. That is one motif which you find very often.
You know that Italy is a country where politics is very important.
Yes.
You know that now many Italian writers are writing tales or fables whose persons are not magic or strange or little or very big, but are the persons of the all days life.
Yes.
And the meaning of this story is always politic, rational, ethic.
Yes.
What's your opinion about
My opinion
this?
It is no value whatsoever, because it does not express genuinely the unconscious and therefore the deeper nature. And therefore these things have an effect for a few weeks or months and then they are forgotten again. When you see the activation of political interest in Italy is because there is a certain spiritual crisis, and people are searching for new values. And the new values always come, you have it in the myth of Christ, they come in Bethlehem, in the most unexpected place. And you can't produce a renewal from consciousness. We see that with a neurotic patient. He is generally quite intelligent and he tries to solve his problem with ethical attitudes, programs and so on. That does not help whatsoever. He has to wait till from the much deeper depth of his instinctual psyche, the new solution comes up.
I know that Jung was your analyst for a long period.
Yes.
What's your memory, your image of the man Jung?
Oh, that
for
I couldn't.
A public that is not a public,
I couldn't.
A psychologist, a psychiatrist, and so
Jung
on.
had so many facets.
Yes.
and was such a surprising personality that though I knew him 28 years, I could have never predicted how and what he would be or what he would say or do. That was perhaps the most striking. He was such an innovator, always spontaneous, always surprising, a bit like a fairy tale trickster. You thought of meeting the great man, and there came out the joyful little boy. Then you thought of playing with the joyful little boy, and came out the most earnest philosopher. Then you thought he would scold you, and he met you with the greatest warmth and feeling and understanding. Then I reckoned that he would father you, and he coldly put you on your own feet and said, go ahead and don't ask Papa. You never knew. It was a constant adventure, a constant excitement to meet you. And one was always a bit trembling because one never knew what he would say or do.
Okay.
But as a general, I would say he was, in the contact, most warm, had a tremendous sense of humor. He loved joking whenever he tried. Whenever he could, he tried to get you out of your problem with a joke and make you laugh at yourself. Naturally, certain tragic problems you couldn't deal that way, and then he met you differently. But he had a great common sense, he had a tremendous fantasy, and he always spread around him an atmosphere of now comes the festival, now something exciting is going to happen. I would say the one quality Jung never had, he was never boring.
I understand. This morning you speak about the active imagination.
Yes.
And its relationships with other new techniques.
Yes.
Psyche techniques.
Yes.
I want to know if you think that there is a relationship between psychodrama, the group therapy funded in Wien and in the United States by Moreno and his followers, and active imagination. Because in each technique, psychodrama and active imagination, the patient realizes something and knows his creation and deals with this creation. And so I want to know if for you to realize in pictures of imagination, or to realize with the body, the emotion, the actors, the scene, the theater, are similar things or not for you?
For me, they are similar things, but they all still belong to what I call the expression of the fantasy, which is the third stage of the active imagination.
The third stage?
The third stage, if you think of my lecture where I put forth stages. And it doesn't reach the next stage, which would be the lonely ethical confrontation, where you can't do that in presence of other people anymore.
Moreno, in some papers, remembers that any patient, qualche paziente, tailored to him that a monster or another person's fantasy lo spaventava, lo terrorizzava. So Moreno said, well, let's look this dialogue, this confrontation. I shall be the monster and the other. You must begin able to make other responses. Responses that are of a new kind of your normal response. What do you think?
That is what I call guided imagination, where the analyst guides it.
Because the analyst is active.
Yes, and he says, you must now look at me as if I were the monster, and you must try to have other reactions. You must. Yes. That's guiding.
But in each case, is it possible to say that the imaginary is very important?
Yes.
Yes.
It has the positive aspect that it releases in imagination, And that is tremendously important, and this does generally a lot of help if one can release or free the capacity of imagination in a patient.
Yeah.
But it isn't active imagination.
Yes.
That is still something different.
Okay. And why it isn't active imagination? Why?
Because the patient is not confronted with it alone, without guidance, except his own inner guidance. And because it is not a play as if. You see, that is an as if. You do as if the journalist were a monster.
Yes.
In a real active imagination, you meet the monster.
Yes.
The real monster.
Yes. There is another kind of psychodrama in Europe, starting from France, about Le Bovici, Yatkin, Kestenberg, Didier, Lemoine. These authors use psychodrama in another direction because they think it's not good for the patient to dialogue with imaginary. So they never make it possible to play fantasy scenes, scenes of hope, of wishful thinking, but just real dreams and real remembers of old events. What do you think of this other technique?
Nothing. Nothing, to tell you the honest truth. That blocks just the unconscious, and that is just doing what the patient does all the time. If you have a neurotic patient, he always thinks if he's going to marry me or if he's not going to marry me, and etc., etc. That's what the the head goes all the time to think about real things and situations and memories and so on. That's the train of thoughts we want to get people away from.
Oh, they think that the patient must reach the real and must go out of the imaginary. They think the contrary of
That's contrary to us, yes.
There is not little imagining. There is too much imagining and there is little really.
Well, that could be recommendable in certain psychotic cases who have lost contact with reality.
Of course. In fact,
and there naturally you might use such techniques, but you can do that much easier.
Yeah.
Jung, for instance, if somebody was flying away in the unconscious, he said, "Tell me what had you this morning at breakfast?" And bang, there you were on the floor again, you see. You had to enumerate what you had for breakfast.
What you said this morning about the boomerang effect and Jung's help that Jung did you, is in this kind of work any relationship with the technique of work with psychotics, in what the therapist must be a little in and a little out?
Yes.
Yes.
One is always a bit infected, and one has to be infected in order to understand. Otherwise, one has no understanding. I know that Jung said once to a colleague of mine who asked him, "Shall I become a therapist?" He said, "Yes, I think you have talent. You have only one drawback. You are a bit too normal." You will have, and I see it because I know that colleague very well. And whenever his patient become very wild, the colleague gets frightened. He has no more empathy. I'm more crazy, so I say, "Oh, this isn't yet crazy, that I can still feel my way into. No, you needn't be worried, that isn't yet bad." But my colleague who is so normal gets frightened and says, "But that is not normal." You see? So that's why most psychologists are a bit crazy, and it's quite useful.
Okay, I understand. So you say there is a danger to reach magic in any sense?
Yes, because of the boomerang effect. They can even release a psychosis in the one who does it.
Yes.
Most, for instance, in folk, if you investigate magicians, if you investigate simple magicians, you know, they live still in every lower population.
Yeah.
They are generally borderlines.
Borderline, of course, I know, yes.
And that is very often, they haven't been, it comes from the boomerang effect.
Could this aspect explain the bad interest for Jung of many peoples who are real, near to astrology, pseudo-magic, irrational, and so on?
Well, you see, in all those arts there is a tremendous amount of psychological truth buried, but it's just a bit wrong.
A bit wrong.
There's a lot of psychological insight, but it has just the wrong turn.
Yes.
And that's why people are attracted and fascinated. They know there's something true there, but then they fall into its wrongness.
What do you think is, in simple terms, the main difference between white and black magic?
In white magic, the magician...
The aims. The difference is in the technique?
No, in the aims. In the white magic, the magician wants to help or to cure, and in the black magic, he wants to give vent to his hatred or to his wish to destroy somebody and so on.
So, could it be possible to say, in the sense of Miguel Serrano's book, The Hermetic Circle? I don't know if you read it.
Yes.
That in any sense, Jung could be compared with a why is that? Because there was too
Because
much
Jung did not know, because Jung would not, was very much again being what he called possessed by the good. Possessed by the good. You see, most people, when they are possessed by evil. They want to destroy political enemy or a personal enemy or God knows what. But you can also be possessed by what you think the good. You want to change society, bring the gold.